June 19th, 1944. The Philippine Sea. Below, the steel-gray monoliths of Task Force 58, the most powerful naval fleet ever assembled, carve white wakes through an unnaturally calm ocean. Above, the sky is anything but calm. It is a maelstrom of fire, smoke, and steel. Hundreds of Grumman F-6F Hellcats, flown by young American pilots, many with barely 100 hours in their logbooks, are systematically, clinically, exterminating the cream of Japanese naval aviation. Wave after wave of Japanese aircraft, Zeros, Vals, Kates, are swatted from the sky before they can even glimpse an American carrier. Radio channels crackle not with the panic of combat, but with the grimly professional call-outs of a hunt. It is a slaughter so one-sided, it will be immortalized with a chillingly casual name: the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. By sunset, over 300 Japanese planes are gone, along with the veteran pilots who flew them. American losses in the air? Fewer than 30. The final combat exchange ratio for the F-6F Hellcat, the workhorse of this victory, would eventually settle at an almost unbelievable 19-1. 19 enemy aircraft shot down for every one Hellcat lost in air-to-air combat. This wasn't a battle, it was an annihilation. It poses a terrifying question. How did this happen? How, in just 2 years, did American naval aviation transform from an underdog, fighting for its life against a seemingly invincible foe, into the most brutally dominant aerial force the world had ever seen? The answer is one of history's most profound ironies. The key to this overwhelming American victory wasn't forged in the sprawling factories of Detroit or the design bureaus of Long Island. It was found, half submerged and waiting, in an Arctic bog. This is the story of how the ghost of a single Japanese pilot and the secrets his wrecked machine gave up provided the critical intelligence, the deadly software, that was loaded into the hardware of the F-6F Hellcat. It's the story of how knowing your enemy didn't just level the playing field. It tilted it so catastrophically that it produced the most lopsided kill ratio in modern aerial warfare. To understand the miracle of the Turkey Shoot in 1944, we must rewind to the dark days of early 1942. In the 6 months after Pearl Harbor, the Pacific was a Japanese lake, and the master of that domain was an aircraft that had become a legend, a demon in the sky. The Mitsubishi A6M, known to the Allies as the Zero. For American pilots flying the rugged but outclassed Brewster Buffalo and the tough but sluggish Grumman F-4F Wildcat, an encounter with the Zero was a lesson in humility and terror. The Zero was a phantom. It could climb like a rocket, seemingly defying gravity. It could turn on a dime, dancing circles around any Allied fighter that was foolish enough to engage in a dogfight. Its incredible range allowed it to appear anywhere, from the shores of Hawaii to the jungles of New Guinea, escorting bombers and sweeping the skies with impunity. The Zero wasn't just an airplane, it was a psychological weapon. It embodied the myth of Japanese martial invincibility. American pilots, raised on tales of their own technological superiority, were being systematically humbled. The official tactical advice when encountering Zeros was often a humiliating admission of inferiority. Break contact, dive away, and run. Survival depended not on fighting prowess, but on the hope that your engine wouldn't quit in a desperate dive for the clouds. This technological and psychological crisis landed squarely on the desk of Leroy Grumman in Bethpage, New York. His company, affectionately known as the Grumman Iron Works, had a reputation for building tough, reliable aircraft. The F-4F Wildcat was a perfect example. It could absorb astonishing punishment and bring its pilot home. But it was a heavyweight boxer in a ring with a master martial artist. It was durable, but it wasn't winning. The Navy needed a successor, and Grumman's team was in a frantic run against time to build it. Their new project, the XF-6F Hellcat, was in its early stages. The initial concept was, essentially, a bigger, more powerful Wildcat. It was an evolutionary step, a logical progression. But as the terrifying combat reports flooded in from the Pacific, a chilling question began to haunt Grumman and his engineers. Was an evolutionary step going to be enough? They were designing a weapon to fight a ghost, an opponent whose true capabilities were only known through the frantic, often contradictory accounts of the few pilots who survived encounters with it. In April 1942, the ghost took on a clearer form. Lieutenant Commander Edward Butch O'Hare, fresh from a Medal of Honor action, where he single-handedly saved his carrier, the USS Lexington, visited the Grumman factory. He had looked the Zero in the eye and lived. His feedback was blunt and direct. He told the engineers the Zero was faster and climbed better than anyone had believed possible. When President Roosevelt had asked him what he needed in a new fighter, his reply was simple: a plane that will go upstairs faster. Based on O'Hare's advice and the growing pile of combat reports, a critical decision was made. The planned engine for the Hellcat was scrapped in favor of the monstrous Pratt & Whitney R2800 Double Wasp, a 2,000 horsepower, 18-cylinder radial engine. This was a quantum leap in power. It meant redesigning the airframe, delaying the project, but it was a necessary gamble. Grumman was no longer building a better Wildcat. They were trying to build a Zero killer, but they were still working from shadows and whispers. They were adding raw, brute horsepower, but they didn't know the enemy's precise vulnerabilities. They were building the hardware, a powerful engine wrapped in a rugged airframe, but they were missing the software. The intimate knowledge required to turn a powerful machine into a truly dominant weapon. They were building a sword, but they didn't know where the chinks in the enemy's armor were. That knowledge, the key to everything, lay waiting 5,000 miles away in the fog-shrouded wilderness of the Aleutian Islands. June 4th, 1942. History knows this as the day the tide turned at the Battle of Midway. As American dive bombers tore the heart out of the Japanese carrier fleet, hundreds of miles to the south, a small, seemingly insignificant sideshow was playing out in the frigid Aleutian Islands of Alaska. This diversionary attack on the American base at Dutch Harbor would, through a bizarre chain of chance, prove just as pivotal to the outcome of the war. Launching from the deck of the light carrier, Ryujo was 19-year-old Flight Petty Officer First Class Tadayoshi Koga. He was a young, confident pilot flying the most feared fighter in the world. His morning mission was a success. He and his wingman strafed the American base, shot down a PBY Catalina patrol bomber, and asserted the dominance of the Zero. The aircraft performed flawlessly, a perfect synthesis of speed and agility. Then, a single bullet changed the world. A round fired from the ground, likely from a .50 caliber machine gun, struck Koga's Zero. It wasn't a fatal hit to the pilot or the airframe. It was something far more insidious. The bullet severed the oil return line. For a high-performance engine dependent on precise lubrication, this was a death sentence. A fine spray of oil began to coat his windscreen. Koga knew his engine would seize within minutes. His training kicked in. He radioed his commander and turned east toward the designated emergency landing site, Akutan Island, a desolate volcanic rock 25 miles away where a Japanese submarine lay waiting to rescue downed pilots. As he descended through the perpetual Aleutian mist, Koga spotted what must have looked like a miracle: a flat, green meadow, a perfect natural runway. His wingman, Chief Petty Officer Makoto Endo, and Petty Officer Tsuguo Shikata circled above as Koga lowered his landing gear for a textbook wheels-down landing. He was going to save his aircraft. Shikata, on his second pass, saw something that made his blood run cold. Glistening between the blades of grass was the reflection of water. He realized with sickening horror that the perfect field was a lie. It was a muskeg bog, a treacherous swamp hidden beneath a carpet of green. He keyed his radio to scream a warning, but it was too late. Koga was committed. His wheels touched the grass at 80 miles per hour. For one brief, beautiful second, the landing was perfect. Then the wheels dug into the soft mud. The deceleration was instantaneous and savage. Physics took over. The lightweight fighter, its tail still traveling at speed, cartwheeled with sickening violence, slamming upside down into the bog. The impact was immense, but the soft ground cushioned the airframe. It did not, however, cushion the pilot. The force snapped Tadayoshi Koga's neck, killing him instantly. He died suspended upside down in his cockpit, his pristine Zero now a tomb. Above, his wingmen faced an agonizing decision. Their standing orders were immutable. Destroy any downed Zero to prevent it from falling into enemy hands. They circled the wreck, their machine guns charged, but the aircraft looked so intact. From the air, it looked like it could be righted and flown away. What if Koga was alive, trapped and waiting for rescue? To shoot would be to murder their comrade. They couldn't do it. Their fuel running desperately low, they made the fateful choice. They turned for home, leaving Koga and his Zero to the silence and the fog. Their act of mercy would become one of the greatest intelligence blunders of the war, a curse upon the Japanese Empire. For 5 weeks, the Zero lay undisturbed, a secret weapon hiding in plain sight. It was a ticking time bomb of intelligence, waiting for a fuse to be lit. On July 10, 1942, that fuse arrived in the form of a lost American PBY Catalina. Piloting the patrol bomber was Lieutenant William Bill Thies, who was navigating by dead reckoning through the treacherous, fog-choked islands. Taking a shortcut over Akutan Island to save fuel, his plane captain, machinist's mate Albert Knack, glanced down through a momentary break in the clouds. He saw something that didn't belong, an unnatural shape in the marsh, painted with the unmistakable bright red circles of the Japanese Hinomaru, the rising sun. Thies circled, marking the position on his charts. The Zero looked almost undamaged. It was a prize beyond their wildest dreams. The time bomb had been found. The race to unlock its secrets had begun. The recovery of Koga's Zero was a brutal 3-week ordeal. Naval engineers and sailors battled freezing mud, relentless damp, and failing equipment to winch the priceless fighter half a mile to a waiting barge. They weren't just recovering an enemy aircraft. They were salvaging the Rosetta Stone of Japanese air power. Koga's body was recovered and given a respectful military burial on a nearby hillside. In August 1942, the Zero arrived at Naval Air Station North Island in San Diego, where it was placed under 24-hour guard. A team of the Navy's best engineers and mechanics descended upon it, their work driven by a desperate urgency. Every day the Zero sat on the ground was another day American pilots were dying against an enemy they didn't understand. This was the autopsy, and what it revealed was the first great twist in the story of the Zero. The legend was a lie. The Zero was not an invincible superweapon. It was a glass cannon. Engineers discovered it was built with a philosophy utterly alien to American design. It was breathtakingly lightweight, almost 2,000 pounds lighter than the Wildcat. But this weight savings came at a terrible cost. There was no armor plate to protect the pilot. The fuel tanks were not self-sealing, meaning a single well-placed round could turn the aircraft into a fireball. The airframe itself was built to minimum tolerances with no margin for combat damage. American planes were built to take a punch and bring their pilot home. The Zero was built to deliver the first punch, with the assumption it would never be hit in return. It sacrificed all survivability for supreme performance. While the engineers dissected its anatomy, another team worked frantically to bring it back to life. In just 41 days, the impossible was achieved. The crushed canopy was replaced, the bent propeller straightened, the landing gear rebuilt. The red meatballs of Japan were painted over with the white star of the United States. On September 20th, 1942, Lieutenant Commander Eddie Sanders, a seasoned test pilot, climbed into the cockpit. He was about to fly the Ghost. Over 24 test flights, Sanders conducted a forensic examination of the Zero's soul. He systematically probed its limits, and in doing so, he discovered the secrets that would doom the Japanese air forces. The autopsy revealed two fatal, exploitable flaws. First was the problem of control stiffness. At low speeds, the Zero was everything the legends claimed, a nimble, peerless dogfighter. But as Sanders pushed the speed past 200 knots, the controls became incredibly heavy. The fabric-covered ailerons, the surfaces on the wings that control roll, began to balloon under the air pressure. To roll the plane at high speed required superhuman strength. The Zero was a demon in a low-speed knife fight, but it was a lumbering pig in a high-speed dive. The second flaw was even more catastrophic. Sanders pushed the control stick forward sharply, putting the plane into a dive and inducing a negative G-force, that stomach-in-your-throat feeling of weightlessness. The Zero's engine coughed, sputtered, and died. The cause was its simple float-type carburetor, which couldn't feed fuel to the engine when it was upside down or weightless. The engine would restart once positive Gs were re-established, but for several critical seconds, the world's most feared fighter was nothing more than a powerless glider. These discoveries were dynamite. The knowledge didn't stay in a dusty report. It triggered a domino effect that rippled through the entire U.S. Navy with lightning speed. The first domino to fall was tactics. Sanders's report became the basis of a new Bible for fighting the Zero. The old, humiliating order to run away was replaced with a concrete, lethal playbook. American pilots were now explicitly taught never to engage a Zero in a low-speed turning fight. Instead, the doctrine became boom and zoom. Use your heavier, more powerful aircraft's superiority in a dive. Attack from above at high speed. Make one devastating firing pass, and then use your speed to climb back to altitude, refusing to get drawn into the Zero's world. And if a Zero got on your tail? Sanders's report provided the escape hatch. Go into a steep power dive. As you do, push the stick forward to induce negative Gs, starving the pursuing Zero's engine. Then, at over 200 knots, roll hard to the right. The Zero, with its stiffening ailerons and powerless engine, simply could not follow. The mystique was shattered. The demon now had a user manual, and its weaknesses were laid bare for every American pilot to learn, practice, and perfect. Pilot morale skyrocketed. The second, and perhaps most crucial domino to fall, was technology. The intelligence from Koga's Zero arrived at Grumman in Bethpage at the absolute perfect moment. The F-6F Hellcat's basic design was set, but it was not yet in mass production. Changes could still be made. Grumman's engineers studied the Zero data not as a blueprint to be copied, but as a checklist of vulnerabilities to be exploited. The Zero's fatal carburetor flaw? The Hellcat was equipped with a pressure carburetor that would feed its R2800 engine flawlessly under any G-load positive or negative. An American pilot could dive away without his engine ever missing a beat. The Zero's stiffening, fabric-covered ailerons? The Hellcat's ailerons were metal-skinned and hydraulically boosted, ensuring they remained light and responsive at speeds where the Zero's controls were locking up. A Hellcat could roll and maneuver with ease at speeds that rendered the Zero helpless. The Zero's fragile, unprotected airframe? Leroy Grumman doubled down on the Iron Works philosophy. The Hellcat would be the anti-Zero. It was designed with pilot armor, a bulletproof windscreen, and self-sealing fuel tanks. It was intentionally overbuilt, a flying tank that could absorb incredible damage. The F-6F Hellcat became the Zero's perfect nemesis. It wasn't just a more powerful plane. It was a custom-designed weapon, meticulously engineered to exploit every single weakness Eddie Sanders had discovered in that captured aircraft. The hardware of the Hellcat was now being loaded with the deadly software of the Akutan Zero. The result would be the most efficient killing machine of the entire war. On August 31, 1943, the F-6F Hellcat made its combat debut. The results were immediate and decisive. In engagement after engagement, the combination of superior aircraft, superior tactics, and superior intelligence began to tell. The tide of the air war in the Pacific didn't just turn, it became a tidal wave. This wave crashed with its full, terrifying force on June 19, 1944, at the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. The scene from our opening was the culmination of this story. The young American pilots weren't just lucky or brave. They were armed with knowledge. When they saw a Zero, they didn't see an invincible demon. They saw a set of specific weaknesses. They knew not to turn with it. They knew to use speed. They knew its controls would lock up. They knew its engine would quit. They fought with a confidence bordering on clairvoyance, because Eddie Sanders had flown their enemy's plane and told them all its secrets. The final statistics of the Hellcat are a testament to this synergy. Over 12,000 were built in just 37 months. They were credited with destroying 5,223 enemy aircraft, accounting for over half of all aerial victories by the U.S. Navy in the Pacific. They created 305 naval aces, and they did it all with that staggering 19-to-1 kill ratio. It was a victory not just of industrial might, but of intelligence. The Akutan Zero itself, the catalyst for this revolution, met an ironic and mundane end. In February 1945, while parked at North Island, an SB-2C Helldiver lost control while taxiing and chewed it to pieces with its propeller. Its job was done. Its secrets had been given, and its legacy was already written in fire across the Pacific sky. Tadayoshi Koga, the 19-year-old pilot who made that final, fatal mistake, became one of history's most unwitting contributors to his own nation's defeat. His remains were eventually returned to Japan, a final, quiet postscript to a story of immense consequence. The legacy of the Akutan Zero is a powerful, timeless lesson. It is proof that warfare is not won by machines alone. It is won by knowledge. The most powerful weapon is not the one with the biggest engine or the most guns. It is the one wielded by a warrior who understands his enemy's weaknesses better than the enemy understands them himself. A single piece of intelligence, a stroke of unbelievable luck in a remote Arctic bog, can be a greater force multiplier than 1,000 factories. It can shatter a myth, forge a new doctrine, refine a weapon, and ultimately change the outcome of a war. The story of the Akutan Zero is a profound reminder that history often turns on the smallest of hinges: a single bullet, a misplaced oil line, a pilot's merciful hesitation. a chance glimpse through a break in the fog. These moments of pure chance, when they intersect with preparation and genius, can create a domino effect that reshapes the world. The F-6F Hellcat gave American pilots the tools to win. The Akutan Zero gave them the knowledge, and together, they gave them total victory. What other lucky breaks or critical intelligence coups do you believe changed the course of history? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you appreciate these deep dives into the hidden connections that shape our world, be sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell. That way, you'll never miss another investigation into history's most fascinating domino effects.